Emily had just finished a long and tiring shift at the hospital. It was a quiet evening, and the corridors were nearly empty as most patients had already gone to bed. Her feet ached from walking up and down the halls, and all she wanted was to sit down with a cup of tea and relax for a moment. She was heading toward the exit, her mind focused on the comfort of her couch and the warmth of a blanket. As she passed the pharmacy counter, she noticed an elderly man standing there. He looked a bit confused and frustrated, holding a small bag in one hand while the other hand fumbled through his wallet. His face, lined with age, showed signs of worry. His glasses, perched at the end of his nose, slid down slightly as he scanned the small amount of cash in his wallet. He looked at the cashier and sighed deeply. "I'm sorry," the cashier said, her voice kind but firm. "It seems you don't have enough for your medication. I'm afraid I can't let you take it unless you pay the full amount." Emily paused and watched the scene unfold. The man looked down at his wallet again, his hands trembling slightly. His shoulders sagged with defeat, and he muttered something under his breath. Emily could see that he was embarrassed. It wasn't loud, but she could hear the words. "I didn't think it would be this much. How am I going to pay?" Without thinking much, Emily stepped forward. She had seen elderly patients like him before, struggling to make ends meet, and her heart went out to him. She gently tapped the man on the shoulder, and when he turned to her, she offered a soft smile. "Sir, don't worry about it," Emily said. "Let me take care of the cost. It's just $23. I'm sure it's nothing." The man looked at her in disbelief, as if he couldn't quite understand. "But I can't let you do that. I don't even know you." "It's all right," Emily reassured him, her voice calm and kind. "We're all in this together. Please, take the medication you need." The cashier, who had been standing quietly by, looked at Emily in surprise but didn't say anything. She rang up the prescription, and Emily handed over her card to pay. The elderly man continued to stand still, his eyes wide in amazement. He thanked her several times, but Emily simply smiled and told him it was no trouble at all. As the transaction was completed, Emily handed him the bag with the medication. "Take care of yourself," she said warmly. The man, still in shock, nodded slowly. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. God bless you." Emily didn't expect anything in return. To her, it was a small act of kindness, something that felt right in the moment. She knew it wasn't a lot, but sometimes small gestures were all it took to make someone feel seen and valued. After a final smile, she turned and walked out of the pharmacy, her mind already drifting to the quiet evening that awaited her at home. Little did she know, this small act would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. 2 days passed, and Emily had nearly forgotten about the small act of kindness she'd done at the pharmacy. Life at the hospital had been busy as usual, with more patients coming in and out, each requiring care and attention. Emily's shift was long, but fulfilling. She loved her job, even on the days that seemed endless. After finishing a particularly challenging shift, she was looking forward to a quiet day off. She arrived home, relieved to be away from the bustling halls of the hospital. Her small apartment felt cozy and peaceful, with sunlight streaming through the windows. She changed into comfortable clothes and made herself a cup of tea. Sitting down on her couch, she let out a deep sigh, feeling the tension in her body finally start to ease. Milo, her cat, curled up beside her, purring softly as he dozed off. Everything felt perfectly normal, just like any other afternoon. Emily took a sip of her tea and opened a book she had been meaning to read for a while. It was one of those rare moments of peace that she cherished, time just for herself, with no interruptions. But as the hours went by, something unexpected happened. The doorbell rang, breaking the calm. Emily glanced at the clock. It was unusual for anyone to visit her at this time of day. She set down her book and stood up, curious about who could be at the door. She wasn't expecting any visitors, and the quiet of the apartment made it all the more surprising when the ring of the doorbell echoed through the hallway. She opened the door to find a man standing there. He was dressed in a dark suit and held a briefcase in his hand. He looked polished and professional, but there was a seriousness in his expression that made Emily's heart race slightly. She didn't recognize him. "Miss Emily Parker?" the man asked, his voice steady and polite. Emily blinked, confused. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" The man gave a slight nod. My name is Thomas Gray. I'm a lawyer representing a client, and I need to speak with you about something important." Emily's confusion grew. She didn't know anyone who would need a lawyer, let alone someone who would show up at her door. Her mind raced with questions, but she didn't want to seem rude or dismissive. Sure," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Please, come in." Thomas entered the apartment, and she led him to the living room. He sat down, opening his briefcase and pulling out a few sheets of paper. His manner was calm, but there was an urgency in his eyes. "I have something to discuss with you regarding a recent act of kindness you showed to one of my clients," he began. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What could this be about? She had helped an elderly man with his prescription, but she never imagined it would lead to anything more. "I don't understand," Emily said, her voice cautious. "I just helped an older man with his medication a couple of days ago. It wasn't a big deal." Thomas looked at her thoughtfully, then nodded. "It may not seem like a big deal to you, Miss Parker, but to my client, it was significant. Your actions have set in motion something much bigger than you realize." Emily's confusion deepened. What could be so important about her small gesture? She had no idea what was coming next, but she was about to find out. Emily sat on the edge of her couch, staring at the lawyer across from her. Thomas Gray had just said something that made her head spin. "Your actions have set in motion something much bigger than you realize." She couldn't understand what he meant. All she had done was help an elderly man pay for his medication, something that seemed so small and insignificant to her. Yet this lawyer's serious tone suggested that there was much more to the story. "I don't understand," Emily said slowly, her voice unsure. "I helped someone, but that's all. It was just a small gesture. Why would it matter so much?" Thomas folded his hands together, his expression focused. "You're right that it may seem small, but to my client, it was more than just a simple act of kindness. You see, the man you helped, Mr. Harris, isn't just any elderly patient. He's the father of a very successful tech entrepreneur." Emily's brow furrowed. "Wait, you're saying that Mr. Harris is the father of someone important?" Thomas nodded. "Yes, and that's why he's been watched closely, though not directly. My client, his son, has been following his father's well-being for years, even though they haven't spoken in a long time. When my client saw the footage of you helping Mr. Harris at the pharmacy, he was moved." Emily blinked in surprise. She had no idea that Mr. Harris's son was even aware of him, let alone keeping track of his life. "But why would he care about me helping him? I'm just a nurse doing my job." "That's where things get interesting," Thomas continued. "My client, Mr. Harris's son, saw what you did and decided to take action. He's a man of great means and influence, but he's been disconnected from his father for years. Watching someone show compassion to his father, especially a stranger, made him rethink his own choices. It reminded him of what's truly important." Emily felt a mix of emotions, confusion, surprise, and a bit of nervousness. "So, what exactly does that have to do with me? I didn't expect anything from helping Mr. Harris." Thomas's eyes softened a little, but his tone remained serious. "That's exactly why it matters. You didn't expect anything, and that's why it means so much. My client believes in rewarding people who act out of kindness without expecting anything in return. That's why he's decided to offer you a gift, something that would not only recognize your generosity, but also support you in ways you never imagined." Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. A gift? From a man she didn't even know. "What do you mean by gift?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. She had a feeling she wasn't going to like what was coming next. Thomas reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the coffee table toward her. "Inside this envelope, you'll find some details about an offer that my client has made. It's something that will change your life, Miss Parker, but it's up to you whether or not you accept it." Emily hesitated, the envelope sitting in front of her like a mystery she wasn't sure she was ready to open. Everything felt so surreal. All she had done was help an old man buy his medicine, and now she was sitting in her living room, talking to a lawyer about a mysterious offer. She wasn't sure whether to feel excited, overwhelmed, or confused. With a deep breath, Emily reached out and picked up the envelope. She didn't know what the future held, but she had a feeling that whatever was inside this envelope would answer many of her questions. Emily held the envelope in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she turned it over. Inside, she knew, was something that could change everything. She had been in her fair share of strange situations, but this one felt like it was unfolding in slow motion. Thomas Gray, the lawyer, sat across from her, waiting patiently. He had not spoken a word since handing her the envelope, but Emily could sense the weight of his silence. It was as if there was something he was holding back. Finally, she opened the envelope. Inside, she found a letter, neatly typed and signed at the bottom. It was from the man who, apparently, had been watching over Mr. Harris for all these years, the tech entrepreneur, his estranged son. The letter explained everything in detail. Mr. Harris, it turned out, had not always been the frail and quiet man she had met at the pharmacy. He had once been a successful businessman, well known in certain circles. But over the years, a series of personal losses and poor decisions had caused him to withdraw from the world. His son, the entrepreneur, had tried to reach out over the years, but their relationship had soured, and they became more and more distant. Emily read the letter carefully. It seemed that despite the estranged relationship, the son had always cared for his father. When he saw Emily's kind gesture, he had been reminded of how much he missed the simple acts of care and kindness he had once known. The son had decided to make sure that his father was cared for, financially at least, and had used his wealth to make sure that Mr. Harris lived the rest of his life in comfort. But there was more. The letter revealed that the son, whose name was Richard, had been struggling with his own sense of guilt. He felt that he had failed as a son, unable to reconcile with his father before it was too late. Watching Emily's act of kindness had struck a deep chord in him, and he wanted to show his appreciation by rewarding someone who reminded him of what truly mattered: compassion. The letter also mentioned an opportunity for Emily. It explained that Richard wanted to support her in a way that would help her make a difference in the world. He had arranged for a trust fund to be set up in her name, one that would help her continue her work in the healthcare field, providing support to others in need. There was also mention of a townhouse, a place that could be hers if she accepted the offer. Emily's heart raced as she read the last few lines. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had expected a thank you note or maybe a small token of appreciation, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She had always dreamed of doing more for others, but this was something entirely different. A chance to change her own life while continuing to help others. She looked up from the letter, meeting Thomas's gaze. He had been watching her closely, as though waiting for her reaction. "It's a lot to take in," Emily said quietly, her mind swirling with thoughts. "I don't even know what to say." Thomas nodded. "I understand. This isn't something anyone expects, but the decision is yours. All you have to do is say yes, and everything will change." Emily looked down at the letter again, her hands gripping it tightly. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. Her life had just taken an unexpected turn, and now she had to decide what to do next. Emily sat still, the letter trembling slightly in her hands as she absorbed every word. The room felt quieter than before, the weight of what she had just read settling heavily in her mind. She had been a nurse for years, helping others, doing what she loved, but this was something completely different. She had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could lead to such a life-changing offer. Thomas Gray, the lawyer, sat across from her, watching her closely. He seemed to understand her confusion, but his calm demeanor suggested that this was all part of the plan. The way he spoke, with a measured tone, made it clear that everything had been carefully thought out. "I know this is a lot to take in," Thomas said, his voice steady but not cold. "It may seem like a dream, but I assure you, everything in this letter is real. It's an offer that comes from a place of genuine gratitude. Your actions didn't just help Mr. Harris, they reminded my client of something he had lost, a sense of connection, of kindness." Emily took a deep breath, trying to process the flood of thoughts racing through her mind. She had always believed that helping others was its own reward. The idea of receiving something in return had never crossed her mind. Yet here she was, facing an opportunity that could change the course of her life. She looked at Thomas. "So, if I accept, what exactly happens?" Thomas smiled faintly, as though he had been expecting this question. If you accept, everything is taken care of. There's a trust fund waiting for you, designed to support your work and future endeavors. My client believes that people like you, who act with compassion and selflessness, should be given the resources to continue doing good. This trust will ensure that you have the financial freedom to help others, pursue your passions, and make a difference on a larger scale. Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. She had always worked hard, but she had never imagined that someone would offer to support her in such a profound way. The townhouse, mentioned in the letter, seemed almost like an afterthought compared to the opportunity to help even more people, but she couldn't help but feel the pull of both. And the townhouse? She asked quietly, still trying to wrap her mind around everything. Yes, Thomas replied. The townhouse is part of the offer. It's a place for you to live, a home that's been set aside for someone who's dedicated their life to helping others. It's a peaceful, quiet space where you can find rest and reflection when needed. It's yours if you choose to accept everything. Emily didn't know what to say. She felt like she was living in a dream, and yet everything about this situation felt so real. She had always been content with her small apartment, her humble life. But this was a chance to do more than she had ever imagined. I don't know, Emily whispered. This is so much. I've never expected anything like this. I don't even know if I deserve it. Thomas leaned forward slightly, his expression softening. You don't have to feel guilty. You acted out of kindness, and that's why my client wants to help you. Sometimes people do good things without expecting anything in return, but that doesn't mean the world shouldn't recognize it when it happens. Emily looked down at the letter once more. This was a turning point in her life, and it was a decision only she could make. She didn't know what the future held, but she felt something stir inside her, a sense of possibility, of hope. The decision would be hers to make, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. The days that followed felt like a blur for Emily. After Thomas left her apartment that afternoon, the weight of the decision rested heavily on her shoulders. She had never expected anything like this to come from such a simple act of kindness. Now, with a letter in her hands and a promise of support for her future, everything had changed. She felt both overwhelmed and grateful, but also uncertain about what to do next. She spent the next few days thinking about it. Every time she tried to focus on her daily routine, caring for patients at the hospital, talking with colleagues, or even relaxing at home, her mind kept wandering back to the offer. It wasn't just about the money or the townhouse. It was about what accepting this offer could mean for her and her future. She had spent so many years helping others, and the idea of someone offering to support her in return was something she hadn't imagined in her wildest dreams. At the same time, she couldn't help but feel guilty. Emily was used to doing things without expecting anything in return. It felt strange to even consider taking something from someone she didn't know, especially when she had never asked for anything. The thought of living in a townhouse that was practically handed to her felt wrong. Somehow, she didn't need a fancy home to be happy. She had always believed that happiness came from the work she did, the lives she touched, and the small acts of kindness that made a difference. This offer, though generous, felt like it might change things in ways she wasn't sure she was ready for. She took the letter out again, reading it slowly, as though it might answer some of the questions swirling in her mind. She read about how Richard, the son of Mr. Harris, had decided to offer her this opportunity because of the simple kindness she had shown to his father. He believed she deserved it. She deserved a chance to do more, to help more people, to live a life that allowed her to grow. The words began to sink in more deeply as she thought about her own aspirations. Emily had always dreamed of doing more for others, but she had never known how to take that next step. The offer wasn't just about money. It was about freedom. The freedom to focus on what she truly cared about. The trust fund, the chance to continue her work in healthcare, the support that would allow her to make a larger impact in the world. It was all too much to ignore. But despite the possibilities, Emily still felt a nagging sense of hesitation. What would it mean to accept this offer? Would it change her, make her a different person? Would she become someone who only helped others because of what she could gain in return? One evening, after a particularly busy day at the hospital, Emily sat down in her small apartment, her thoughts swirling. She took a deep breath, trying to find clarity. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew she couldn't make this decision alone. She had always relied on her instincts, But this time, the decision felt too big to make without considering everything carefully. And so, Emily decided to take a step back. She needed more time to think. She needed to make sure that whatever choice she made, it was the right one. For her, and for the people she wanted to help. The days turned into weeks, and Emily's decision remained on her mind. Every time she tried to focus on her daily routine at the hospital, her thoughts kept drifting back to the letter, to the offer, to the choice that seemed to be shaping the rest of her life. It was hard to concentrate on anything else. At work, she did her best to care for her patients, as she always did. But there was a lingering feeling in her heart, a feeling of uncertainty, as though the future was calling her. But she wasn't sure if she was ready to answer. One afternoon, as she sat in the hospital break room, scrolling through her phone, Emily came across a story. It was about a nurse who had been recognized for her selfless work in an underserved community. The article praised her for her dedication, her ability to make a real difference in the lives of the people she cared for. As she read the story, Emily felt a strange sense of inspiration. The nurse in the story had done incredible things, but she had also faced many challenges. What struck Emily the most, however, was how much the nurse had achieved with limited resources. Emily leaned back in her chair, reflecting on her own journey. She had spent years working with what she had, doing her best to help others, no matter how small the impact. But the truth was, she had always felt limited. There had always been barriers. Financial constraints, lack of time, and a healthcare system that was often stretched too thin. Emily had always managed. But deep down, she had known that there was so much more she could do if she only had the chance. The offer from Richard, Mr. Harris's son, was like a door opening to those possibilities. The trust fund, the financial freedom, the opportunity to create lasting change in the world. It was everything Emily had ever dreamed of. But there was a catch. Accepting the offer would mean stepping into a new world, a world where things might be different, where she wouldn't have to struggle the way she always had. It was a world she had never known, and that made her nervous. The next morning, Emily woke up early, as she always did. The sunlight filtered through her bedroom window, casting a warm glow on the room. She stretched, trying to shake off the lingering thoughts from the night before. Today, she told herself, today she would decide. She couldn't keep going back and forth. The decision had to be made. She got dressed, made a quick breakfast, and grabbed her things to head to work. As she walked out the door, she paused for a moment, looking around her apartment. It was small and modest, but it had always been hers. It was the place where she had found peace after long shifts, where she had rested and recharged for the next day. The thought of leaving it behind, of accepting something so big, filled her with mixed emotions. At the hospital, Emily went through her usual routine. She helped her patients, provided comfort where she could, and supported her colleagues. But in the back of her mind, she knew that this was her last day of uncertainty. Tonight, she would make the call. She would either accept the offer or walk away from it forever. As the day came to a close, Emily took a deep breath. No matter what happened next, she knew one thing for sure: she had done her best. Now, it was time to make a decision about her future. As the sun began to set that evening, Emily sat at her kitchen table, the letter from Richard still in front of her. The quiet of the apartment surrounded her, and for the first time in days, she felt a calmness settle over her. The decision, though difficult, was finally clear in her mind. She had spent so much time questioning whether she deserved the opportunity that had been presented to her. But the truth was, she realized that sometimes good things happen for people who had always tried to do their best. Emily had spent years helping others in small, meaningful ways, always giving without expecting anything in return. She had been content with the work she did, the small victories, and the daily moments of connection with her patients. But now, with this unexpected offer on the table, she had to accept that it wasn't just about helping one person at a time anymore. It was about a chance to make a bigger impact, a chance to truly create change. The trust fund, the townhouse, and the chance to live without the constant worry of financial struggle were all gifts that would allow her to focus on what mattered most. She could help even more people. She could reach further, do more, and perhaps even start projects she had always dreamed of, but never had the resources to begin. Emily thought about the future, about what she could do with the support she was being offered. The possibilities seemed endless, and the idea filled her with excitement. But there was one thing she knew for sure. This opportunity wasn't about taking something for herself. It was about using the resources and support to help others, to continue her work, and make a greater difference in the lives of those who needed it most. The decision she had to make wasn't about luxury or comfort. It was about taking the tools that were now available to her and using them to help create positive change. Emily picked up her phone and dialed the number on the letter. Her heart raced as it rang, but there was no hesitation in her voice when Richard answered. "Hello, this is Emily Parker," she said, her voice steady. "I've thought long and hard about your offer, and I've made my decision. I'm ready to accept it." On the other end of the line, Richard's voice softened. "Thank you, Emily. I believe you'll do great things with this opportunity. My father and I both appreciate your kindness, and I'm glad you're willing to let us support your future." Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her as she spoke. The uncertainty that had clouded her thoughts for so long began to fade, replaced by a feeling of purpose. She wasn't just accepting a gift, she was accepting a challenge to use the resources given to her to help others in ways she had always hoped for. After she hung up, Emily sat in silence for a moment, looking out the window. The world outside was quiet, the streets calm. It felt as though the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for something big to happen. As she looked out over the city, Emily smiled softly. She didn't know exactly where this new path would lead, but she knew one thing. She was ready to embrace the future and use every opportunity she had to make a real difference in the world. The journey ahead was uncertain, but she was more than ready to take the first step.